Hey, what's up, Christopher? Oh, oh, sorry. I think I need a water. Oh, that was weird. Something happened to my voice there. Hey, what's going on, guys? Christopher Fraser here with a very exciting Blender tutorial. Today, we're going to be looking at my brand new planet shader for Blender, free for both Eevee and Cycles. You can check out the Gumroad link in my description below. But I just want to start off by showing you the trailer so that we can see a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. All right, super cool. So if we go back and just look at a little bit of the a few of the features here, we can see we've got some clouds here. If we just look back here, see we've got some clouds. We got a little bit of this atmosphere glow, which I think we can see better in some shots. Like this one here, you can see a little bit of that glowing sticking out. Again, some of those really nice clouds. It's just overall kind of a nice shader. We've got here this shadow illumination, where you can see that we've got the lights here that are only here in the dark part of the earth, but you can't see them over in the bright part. And we're going to be talking about how to set all of these things up today. But yeah, so if you have not downloaded the shader already, you can download the project file, again, from my Gumroad. Link to that in the description below. You can feel free to pitch in a couple bucks if you would like to. But from there, I think that it's worth it to just jump right in. So make sure that you create a new Blender scene, and then we will just select the default cube and this light here. We'll hit X and delete both of those because we will not need them because we are making a planet. What we're going to need instead is if we hit Shift A, so we open up the add menu, or we can go under Add, Mesh, and click on UV Sphere. And then this is a little bit low poly for me, so we'll just open up this little menu on the side here and set the segments to 128 and the rings to 64. So it becomes a little bit smoother. And then we'll right click on it and hit Shade Smooth to really make it nice and smooth. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do now, before we even move on, is we will probably want to actually import the shader. So just go to File and click on Append. And then you're going to find wherever you downloaded your shader to. And then we will just open that up. Under Node Tree, we'll double click on Planet Shader, and then it will automatically bring in that other thing that you saw there, but we don't have to worry about that right now. And then what we'll do is we can go ahead, we can set this to rendered mode, and then we will split the view here and set this to a shader editor so that we can do all of the things that we're going to need to do for this. So I'll just hit N to collapse the side panel, and then we'll select the sphere, create a new material, and we can call this planet. And then the first thing that we want to do is remove the principled BSDF because we won't need it. We're working with our brand new planet shader here. So we'll just Shift A, Group, Planet Shader, and then make sure that you have Node Wrangler enabled. If you do not already, which every tutorial ever will tell you to do, go under Add-ons, search for Node, make sure that that box is checked. We can close that. And that will mean that you can just skip the step of dragging this over to there and Control Shift left click on it, and it'll just plug it right in. Now obviously this is a little bit dull and we can't really see much, so we're actually going to make it darker by setting the background strength down to 0. And then what we're going to do is we will hit Shift A again, and this time we'll add in a sunlight, and then we can just move it over here so it's easier to see, and then we'll rotate it along the x-axis and then maybe the z-axis as well. Great. That is just great. But this doesn't seem to look much different from the principled BSDF. And that's because we need to change some of the material settings in Eevee. The first thing that I want to do, though, is I'm just going to hit N to bring this panel over here up. And under View, I'll set the focal length to something like 100. And it's just going to make it look a little bit nicer and more accurate, I suppose. So we can just hit N again, So what we want to do, and actually the other thing that I will do, is I'll change the color management to the look here to very high contrast, just to make it feel a bit punchier. Now what we need to do is under the sphere, we want to go to the Material tab down here and find where it says Blend Mode. Right under Settings, you'll find Blend Mode, and we want to change this to Alpha Blend. And you can see that it immediately kind of messes everything up and makes it look all wonky. And to fix that, we just need to uncheck this Show Backface option. And now, by doing that, you'll notice that we've got this nice little haze here it's a little bit gray white-ish. And that's about the only change that you'll notice from the principled BSDF. And we'll be talking a little bit, it will become more apparent what those changes are. But the first thing that we can do, because right now it's a little bit dim and so is that glare. So if we click on the sun, I'm just going to bring the strength up to something like 5. There you go. Now it's a little bit more obvious and it's going to be a little bit easier to see as we work with it. Now, down in the description below as well is going to be a download link to some custom Earth textures that I've made specifically for this. It's compiled using NASA imagery, which means that it is completely free for you to use for whatever purposes you want to. And what we're going to do is we're just going to drag in some of these textures. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to unplug this from the surface so that it doesn't have to rebuild the shaders every time I plug in one of these textures. So we have the color. We'll bring in next the roughness. Make sure to set that to non-color data. Move these out of the way. The normal, set that to non-color data as well. And then I will just come in here, Shift A, vector, normal map. I'm really tempted to hit Q here. What you can do is Q is for your quick favorites. And this is what I like to do, is if you hit Shift A, and then on the search bar here, if you just make sure that you right click on this and hit add to quick favorites, then when you hit Q, it will bring this up and you can just search for whatever you want to. I could just bring in an RGB curves node here if I wanted to, or a color ramp, and then I just have it in like that. It's kind of like using FX console if you use After Effects and you use FX console for it. If not, don't worry about it. I will try not to use it to make things a bit clearer. So we've got all of that set up, and we can even take a look at how it is now and give it a second to compile. These are fairly high resolution textures, so it may take it a second for it to figure it out. And here, this is just the color, the roughness, and the normal. There we go. Now that the textures are loaded in, we can see that it looks a bit more like Earth. We can see some more of those features coming through. Like we can see the roughness there happening. We can see the nice atmospheric haze just a little bit. We can see a little bit better. But it's looking a little weird since it's gray, because the sky and the atmosphere, they are not gray. So what we're going to do here is we'll just zoom in here. Maybe we'll expand this so we can read these a bit better. And we'll take the sky color, and I'll just punch that up. And since the sky on Earth is blue, what we'll do is we'll take this and bring this a little bit towards blue. We don't want it to be too saturated, because that ends up going into the realm of Crazyland. But we'll just bring it towards blue a little bit. We'll pick a color, something kind of like that. A nice, well, a sky blue. And that looks pretty good. What you really want to look at here is this atmosphere. What I might do is I might bring it a little bit more this way. That looks pretty good. I mean, you can set it to a color that you think looks good. But that's going to make the sky look nice and blue. But there still seems to be a few things missing. The reason why the Earth, it still kind of looks like a cartoon right now. And the biggest reason for that is because there are no clouds. There's also no lights anywhere. So in order to add in the clouds, and this is the beauty with this shader, is that we just bring in our clouds texture and plug it right into the clouds map. These other three settings we don't have to worry about right now. We just plug in the clouds map, give it a second. Again, these are very high resolution textures we're working with here. And we've got some clouds, and it instantly looks tons and tons better. This now looks like a real planet. And you can see the way that it adds in the clouds, and then it automatically does some cool bump mapping and things. It makes it look really nice. If you would like to, the settings are here for you to play with. So if you want to change the strength of the clouds bump or the distance, if you know much about using the bump node inside of Blender, then you can do that. You can mess around with that a little bit. But that's pretty much all we need to do, is just plug in that clouds map. And then we have the emission. And it's dawning on me how short this is going to be because of how simple this is to use, which is, of course, the idea. So I'll bring in the emission, and then we'll plug this into that emission. And then there we go. That was a bit faster. And you can see that we've now got lights. And this right here, you could just call this a day. In fact, I think I will. Thanks for watching. No. So what we've got here is pretty much a fully set up planet. We've got all of our PBR textures in here. We've got the clouds, and we've got the lights, the emission here. But there's still something missing, is that shadow illumination. You can see here the way that we can definitely see the lights here over in the illuminated part of the Earth, which is kind of weird. Like, why would these cities have like all of the lights on in these buildings midday? So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to take advantage of some of that illumination, some of those illumination things. Now I'm actually going to rearrange those just because the lines here were crossing each other, and I think it looks, it's easier to follow if that's not happening. So we're going to need to use some of that shadow illumination that I have included here. But you'll notice that there are no settings for that in the planet shader. And that's because it's not something that's in the shader itself. Because you don't always need to use this. And I felt that the settings that you would need in here, it adds in a bunch more length that isn't super necessary. It just makes it feel a little less intuitive. So included when you import this, if we hit Shift A and group, you'll find this sun mask node. So we'll click on this, add it in, and if we just drop it in, then suddenly all the lights are gone. Yay. Well, this means that there are not any lights here in the illuminated part, so I would call that a job well done. But I think we can make it look a little bit nicer. So there are actually a couple of different modes here. We've got mask, color, Eevee color, and viz. All we really care about right now is color and Eevee color. Now, since we are in Eevee right now, we could actually use the Eevee color, plug that into the emission, and then you'll notice that it just works. Right there, bada bing, bada boom, done. And then you could call that a day if you're just working in Eevee, which most of the time you may be, especially if you're doing shots that are just planets. You might just use Eevee because it's so fast, and this doesn't require a lot of special computing abilities. But if we're going to click over here and use cycles, what you'll notice is that it goes completely black again. And that's because this feature, the Eevee color, makes use of the shader to RGB node, which is only available in Eevee. So in order to have it set up properly to work inside of cycle, and what's cool about that is that that also means, if you're using this, that if you have something else, like say point light in here, that the lights will turn off. And there, you see there how the lights are now turning off, and you can see the soft lighting, how that kind of messes with things. That's one of the cool things about using it with Eevee. That's something that cycles can't do because of the way that it is set up here. So if we switch over to cycles here, and we don't actually need to switch over to cycles because this method also works with Eevee. We're going to need to do a bit more setup here, but it's not going to take super long. So we're just going to start off by selecting our sun, okay? And I'm going to run you through these steps because there are also scenarios when you're using Eevee where you might want to use this. So I'm just going to hit Alt-G and Alt-R to center out the position and the rotation, the location and the rotation. Then I'm just going to hit Shift-A, and we want to add in a new empty, okay? So this will be a plane axis, and then I'll just hit G and Z, and hold down Control, and then we'll just move it up so that it's essentially up from where the sun is coming from, if that makes sense. And that's the idea. That's exactly where we want it. Now, we can rename this to sun position, and then we want to parent it to the sun. So over here, if I hold down Control, it'll select the sun, and this will be the active thing. The sun will be the active thing selected. So if I select like a bunch of different things here, whatever I last control click on will be the active element. So we want to select the sun position, control left click on the sun, hit Control P, and set parent to object with keep transform. And now as we move this around, you can see that empty is going to move around with the sun, or as we rotate around the sun, sorry. Then it's going to move around that empty there. Now we want to leave the sun in the center of the scene now. But what we can do is we can set our lighting back up to however we had it, however we like it here. And we can click back over here to the planet. That's all that was needed to do for those objects. Now the reason is because there's a little bit of shader trickery in here. We can switch back over to this regular color. There's a bit of shader trickery in here, which is going to say it's going to take these points, these values here, and use it as a direction. So you can see as we change these here, as we mess around with these values, how it's sort of changing where there is illumination. What we want to do is we actually want to link this to these values to the position of this object right here, this empty, which is not as hard as it sounds. All we need to do, just repeat it after me, is we're going to start with the X position, with this X value here. We're just going to right click on it, hit add driver, or if you hover over it and hit Control D, then it will add a driver. We want to select the sun position, and since it's already got X location and value is good, then we can just click out of it. Then we're going to do the Y position. So right click, add driver, select the sun position, set the type to Y location this time, and then we want to hit update dependencies. For the it works automatically for the X. We don't need to hit that because X location is automatically selected. But for Y and Z, we need to set that up. So then we come in here, the Z, add driver, Z location. See, it doesn't matter what order we do these in. Sun position, which means we're getting the Z location of the sun position, and hit update dependencies. Great. Now, when we look at it, it's doing the same thing basically as the Eevee the Eevee color. It's hiding it in the illuminated parts of the Earth. And if we switch over to cycles, then we'll notice that it has started to work here as well. We don't have lights over here where the sun is shining nice and bright, but as soon as it becomes nighttime, then all of the lights come out. And this is, of course, exactly what we want. Now, another cool feature about this, another one of the little things with this, is that you can change this hardness value here. So it works a little bit differently with Eevee. You can see if you set the hardness to 0, it only goes out so far. It only goes out to around here. As you can see, all the way over here isn't illuminated. But with the color, if the hardness is set to 0, you'll get a little bit of illumination even all the way out here. What the hardness basically does is it says how soft is this going to be, or I guess how hard is it going to be. So if we set this all the way to 1, then right at this line here, it's going to be super, super sharp. It's going to be this really harsh line, as though as soon as the sun goes down, everybody is shutting off their lights. If you set the hardness to 0, then you can see how it gets really soft, how it gets a bit darker kind of over here, and it gets brighter over here. I generally like to leave it at 0.5. I think that's a pretty good value. You could set the hardness up a little bit more if you wanted to, maybe 0.65, because we don't need all of the lights over here turned on necessarily, or maybe you do. It depends on how you like it. That's why the option is there. But then that's going to allow you to change the hardness of that value. That's how you can set that up. Now, with this, like I said, it works a bit differently. With this, you'll notice that the lights don't turn off over here with this light. But let's put it this way. Let's say you're going to do like a Death Star planet destruction type thing. And so you've got a light, right? You've got, in this case, it would be a green light illuminating part of the Earth where the Death Star is striking. Well, people in all of these cities aren't automatically turning off their lights because of this split second of light, or if it could be anything else, some kind of a world-ending something other, or something from space, something, crazy and extraterrestrial and whatnot. We're looking at it here, and this part of the Earth may be illuminated, but that doesn't mean that people are turning off their lights, because, what the heck is happening here, right? If there were just if there's some kind of a world-ending thing that was shining its light down on Earth, I don't know that I would be dashing to turn off my lights. So just something to think about. The other cool thing to notice about this is that everything like the atmosphere and everything works regardless of how that's set up. So with these external lights, either way, that does work, which is physically accurate, because whether or not you're turning on or off your lights, the atmosphere is still doing its thing. Now, something I can't even remember if I talked about this earlier, but one of the cool things that this does is towards the edge here, if you look at it at more of an angle, it has this sunset capability. And this is something that I'm mentioning just because it's something that I'm happy with. It's kind of a cool touch. And this is something that you'll see in real pictures from like the ISS of the Earth at points like this, is you get this cool orange tinted reflection. Now what's cool about this is you might notice when the sky color, when it's not saturated, when it's just black and white or like a gray color, then that becomes gray as well. And the reason is because of the way that atmospheres actually work. Now this isn't using a physically correct simulation, but it's meant to emulate it. So the way that it works is that when light hits the atmosphere, right, some of it gets scattered. On Earth, the blue light gets scattered away, which leaves us with oranger light, which is why the sun appears to be a bit yellow in our sky. If you're actually out in space, the sun is it's perfectly white. And that's why sunsets are so orange, is because the sun is just traveling through more, the light is traveling through more atmosphere. So if we change the sky color here to a different color like red, then it becomes teal, which you might think is kind of crazy, like the idea of a teal sunset. But if you actually look up an image, let's do it. If you look up an image of a Mars sunset, then you can see here that it's blue, because the sky on Mars is actually tinted a bit red. So these are real pictures. This is a real picture of what a sunset looks like on Mars. So pretty cool. Emulating. So no matter what color you choose, the sunset will be accurate and match it. So if you're going for some kind of weird purple planet, then you'll get the green sunsets. So it all matches up. And oops, now I should probably change the color back. The other thing that I just want to talk about briefly is the way that this atmospheric haze works. So you'll notice that when you select the planet, the outline goes around that halo. And the reason is because the way that this works is it doesn't actually have some kind of a volume atmosphere that it works off of. What it does is it cuts inside of the outline, the very outside part of the planet, depending on what angle you're looking at it from, and it creates kind of a fake halo. It creates this fake atmospheric glow here. So what you'll notice is as you turn up the glow factor, you see it doesn't seem to change the size of the planet. It's almost like a mask that's revealing part of it. So it's something to keep in mind. It's not a problem you should run into anyways, because for a planet like Earth, you don't get this much glow anyways. In fact, setting it to 0.5 is even perhaps a little bit much. With larger planets, there's only a very small amount of that little glow there. And those are the planets that you're going to see close up, so you won't really notice that it's cutting that away anyways. And then if you have a smaller planet, like some kind of a moon type planet, where you want to turn this up because it's smaller and whatnot, then those are likely going to be way in the background anyways. So it'll be harder to notice. So that is something that I figured I would mention. But it's something else to keep in mind too, is that you can fully customize this. You can have no atmospheric glow, or you can have a lot of atmospheric glow, or you can be like only that, or whatever you want it to be. Same thing with the haze. You can have just a little bit of haze, or you can have a lot of it. With a larger planet, you might see a little bit less of this haze from the perspective that like it might be a bit tighter towards the edges. Right? So maybe a more accurate simulation of Earth is something more like this. Right? Where it's a bit tighter towards the edges, and that atmospheric haze is a little bit less intense, perhaps. But all in all, that's pretty much all you need to know to make realistic planets in Blender now using the planet shader, which is once again free to download from my Gumroad, link down in the description below. Be sure to check it out. The only thing that I ask of you in return is to tag me in anything cool that you make. I would love to see the cool things that you make using this shader. I'm really excited to see what people are going to do with this, because suddenly it's a super quick and easy way to just make planets. You just bring in your sphere, plug in the shader, plug in your textures, and then you've pretty much got it all good to go. So again, be sure to check it out. Free download link to the textures down in the description below as well. And I'm going to be doing a tutorial as well on doing some compositing in After Effects to go along with this. So making your planets look the best that they can be, but also how you can do some things like adding some lens flares, but that also follow with the camera movement inside of your Blender scene and are tracked perfectly without having to do any kind of tracking or manual hand animation work. So if you would like to see that once it comes out, be sure to subscribe as well, and you could even hit that little bell if you feel like it, so that you can be notified of exactly when it comes out and you can be the first to know how it's done. But with all of that out of the way, I will see you in the next video. Enjoy.